Is James still on?
Yeah, he left.
Okay. Well, so we're coming around on our Earth Day celebration, and we're going to pull these two facts together. I think Mr. Pinckney has been on all afternoon, and so I would like to make sure we hear from him. Particularly, he's going to tell and share with us about Earth Day and some of the important factors and aspects of us taking better care of the Earth. Now, you know, each person has a particular responsibility to do better. I mean, we know better, we can do better. And so we're delighted to have Bill Pinckney with us. He's well-renowned, and he can share with us and tell us about what we have to, we should do, and we must do to take better care of our Earth. Bill, please share with us.
You will have to introduce yourself to us. Okay.
Sure. Glad to do it. I'm Bill Pinckney. I'm retired now, 47 years in the workforce, 27 as a soldier scientist in the Army. And at this point, I want to, before I forget to do it, is thank those on today who have also served, and especially those who have served in war zones. I, as a soldier scientist, was a rather, well, not odd, really odd, but anyhow, my only hazardous duty service was as a brand new Army second lieutenant back in 1969, assigned to the US Navy Hurricane Hunters. And so that was the only hazardous duty I've ever done. And I appreciate and admire each and all of you that have served in war zones over the years. Your job's much harder than mine has ever been. So 27 years in the Army, 22 on active duty, and another 5 as a civil servant, and then a second career in the aerospace industry. And the last 5, now going on 6 years, were involved in writing this book, which really summarized the thread that went throughout my 2 careers, which was, in the case of the Army, making sure the soldiers on the battlefield could see better than the bad guys. And then a similar story of protecting aircraft from being shot down by heat-seeking missiles in my second career, all of which involve knowing what's going on in the air we breathe and see through. So that's my history. This is an awareness segment, actually. I just wanted to give you an update. It's been about a year since I've been on, I think, Elizabeth and Elton, and of what's been happening in the environment over that period of time, and then some things that we can do to make it better. And so I'm going to bring up a few slides here. My book, A Tale of Two Climates, One Real, One Imaginary, is about the other side of the story that you don't see nearly as often in the news media and social media, which is that our Earth is doing just fine. It's doing as it should be. And so my book is an attempt to share some of the data that's behind the truth of what's going on with our atmosphere. So I'm going to share a few slides now. Bear with me for just a second. Okay, so this is, let me go to full screen now. There we go. So this is the book that I've been telling you about. And where we're going from here, so we've heard that our global temperature is increasing. That's true. It's very true. As you can see on this slide here, the zigzag blue line of the monthly average global temperatures over the last 43 years. The black line is the trend. And that's the big thing that a lot of people don't get about climate. It's different. Each of those little blue zigzag lines is the weather, the temperature of the weather, and the overall long time global large area trend in the weather is upward by about 1 degree over the last 43 years or so. So yes, it's true, our temperature is increasing, but it is doing it in a beneficial and nourishing way, as I'm going to show you. So why is it that this is happening? Well, it's quite natural, and you have to look back through the rearview mirror of history to see it. And the reason that we're warming, uh-oh. I don't know what's going on here. Just bear with me until this phone died. There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No problem.
So can you still, my screen sharing is paused. I'll resume share. Okay, so here we are. So why is our temperature going up? Well, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years to the fact that we're in an interglacial warming period, as you can see here on the screen, these little green areas here, in an otherwise continuous ice age. And these interglacials happen about every 100,000 years. And right now, this is the one we're in here, where they typically last 10 to 15,000 years. And we're in the 12,000th year of the current one right now. But the point is that we're supposed to be warming. That's what happens in an interglacial. And why does this happen in an interglacial? Well, there's 3 reasons. The sun, of course, water, and planetary motion, or which cause these interglacial warm periods that you see here.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's increasing over time is carbon dioxide, which has been demonized a lot, but it's one of those 2 gases of life, along with water vapor in the air, that are essential for all life. And yes, it's true that carbon dioxide is increasing in the air, but it's as it should be. And the reason, and the important thing to note here, is that the combination of the water vapor and the water and the carbon dioxide are greening our Earth. As you can see here, it's been going on for well over 3 decades now, and it's getting greener, except in certain areas like here in the Middle East, and I believe that's the Sahara region. But overall, we're greening, and it's because of carbon dioxide in the air, which acts as an airborne fertilizer. And so that's the reason we're warming, and it's a good warming. You often hear that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Yes, that's true. And that it is the fact that it's a greenhouse gas and the effect caused by that is warming. That's not true. It's those 3 things that I mentioned early. The sun, water, and planetary motion are what are causing all this greening. The other thing to note on this slide is all the blue in the area here. That's the water, of course, and it occupies about 71%, almost 3/4 of the surface of the Earth is covered by water, and that's also very important to our existence here. So that's the why of what's happening, and the fact is that the greening is good, and the result of the greening is to provide food on the table, and oxygen component of the air we breathe is what happens because of this greening. And with the continuing rise in population, the greener, the more food, the better. So now what's happened? we've heard a lot of noise over the last year, a lot of, not noise, but a lot of attention being paid because of the social media and the ease of which we get our news these days. They talk about the weather, which is a short-term thing as opposed to the longer-term trend. And for example, and those of you in the Midwest, the tornado trend of the strong tornadoes, the killers, and the, like last December was one in the Tennessee Valley area that did a whole bunch of damage last December, which is not normal time to see tornadoes. But what you see here is in these strong tornadoes, the trend since the 1950s has been steadily down. I mean, they're up, they zigzag up and down from year to year, but the long-term trend in severe storms, tornadic activity is down. And the same is true for hurricanes, which are especially important to you along the Atlantic seaboard there. And from this curve, it certainly looks like hurricanes are going up over time. But the fact of the matter is this increase in hurricanes is not because the number of hurricanes increased. It's because satellites came into being and pulse Doppler radar and other technologies allowed us to see all of the hurricanes from satellite views over the world, most of which, many of which, never even hit land. So this is a misnomer here. The fact of the matter is that hurricanes across the world now, this is a global cyclone count, typhoons in the Pacific, cyclones in the Indian Ocean, and then of course the North Atlantic hurricanes. The trend there is flat. That means they're not increasing, they're not decreasing by very much either, but overall, the trend is flat in these other type of severe storms. Out here in the West, heat waves have become a big thing over the years, but the truth of the matter, and this comes from the EPA, is that heat waves, although they're bad when they happen to you, they're quite down in the noise compared to back in the Dust Bowl era, when there wasn't any social media or internet forms of communication like there are today. So the point here on this is just that there's no significant trend in heat waves. And this is the US we're talking about here as well. No heat, no up or down in heat waves associated with that. And our listener from Washington State or Oregon can certainly attest to the wildfire situation that we're experiencing here in the Western United States. But the fact of the matter is when you look at wildfire history, it was much worse back in the 1930s, the Dust Bowl area. This is total acres burned. So what we were looking back in the 30s, before news got out nearly as well as it does today, was we were burning 50 million acres a year back then. With all the logging operations, it came way down over the years, and then we stopped logging, and through land management issues, clearing underbrush and wild grasses and the like, they started back up, but we're still down around 10 million acres compared to 50 million acres almost 100 years ago now. So, and lately out in here, we've been seeing these notorious wildfires, and my heart goes out to anybody that's affected by them in any way, which includes here in Utah. And we had one fairly near to us a couple of years ago, but anyhow, wildfires are down compared to what they used to be, way down. So anyhow, that's a brief history of last year. A lot of times you see not enough homework being done, and what you hear is that carbon dioxide is the cause of all evils, and it's just not true. And yes, it's where I live here in Utah, it's an arid part of the United States, and and we're suffering in drought conditions now. And just to conclude quickly here, let me just talk about what we can do as citizens as we think about Earth Day or Earth Month or every day that we should be doing. First of all, remember the earlier slide back here that I showed how much water our planet is consumed by or are on the surface of. In the West, there's not enough water. In the East, in the United States, there's probably too much water more often than not. And the issue isn't that we don't have enough water. There's plenty of water to go around. It's just not in the right places always at the right times. So one of the things that they're talking about doing in California, I don't know about Oregon and Washington State, but California and Utah in particular, are talking about trying to redistribute some water to arid places like Utah and Idaho and California, and by pumping seawater from the Pacific Ocean. In the case of Utah, they're talking about pumping it across to the dry lake bed of the Great Salt Lake here to cut down on dust pollution, which is bad, especially at the windy times of the year here in Utah. So, and we know how to do pipelines. There's nothing new about that. And it's just a question of maybe piping it where it needs to be. And so that's being looked at. It's being looked at in California to just pump water into the dams to help fight fires and the like. So that's one thing that we can be doing. Desalination is another thing. I mean, pumping salt water into the Great Salt Lake is fine, but if you want to pump it into Lake Mead or Lake Powell or any of those, you might want clean water. And so you could also take we know how to do desalination as well. And we do know how to move water around. And so that's being looked at. That's one thing that's being looked at. All the pluses and minuses over the life cycle of doing it. And it's a management thing as well as a political thing. Another thing that we all need to recognize, and this is my opinion now, is that we need all forms of energy. We need fossil fuels, we need nuclear, we need renewables, wind and solar, and when they're ready, wind and solar still are intermittent sources as opposed to fossil fuel and nuclear, for example, which are continuous 24/7 sources. So we need to keep our eye on wind and solar, but right now they are still, when you look at the life cycle cost again, from cradle to grave, from the mining end up front to the disposal end at the end, as well as everything in the middle, wind and solar at this point are still more expensive than fossil fuels and nuclear. So just recognize that we need all forms and to keep an eye on what wind and solar may do for us in the future. Another one is small modular nuclear reactors are coming on board now. They're safe and they're coming online, and they're you can move them around more easily, and they're a continuous source of clean energy. We need to support the modernization of our coal-fired power plants as well. Coal, the technology now is much better than it used to be, much better than when I mean, orders of magnitude better than when I was growing up 60, 70 years ago. And so they now have modern technologies to scrub the pollutants out of the coal, out of the exhaust of the coal-fired power plants. And so that will help us as well. And the other thing, preventing wildfires. Well, we just, it's a tough problem. We need to be doing more education, Smokey the Bear type education for everyone, because a great number of wildfires are human caused. As well as we need to do controlled burns. And I'm familiar with that, especially here in Utah. They're doing it smartly. to remove underbrush and wild grasses, dry grass kindling. For example, doing controlled burns just before a rainstorm or just before a snowstorm, which happened just yesterday here in Utah. As I was driving down the interstate, there was a sign saying, don't call us, this is a controlled burn. And by the time I came home in the afternoon, it was out. And when the rain started, by the time the rain even started. And anyhow, it's smart things that we need to do to prevent wildfires. And a lot of them are forest management things. Just a couple more here. Well, actually just one more. And then we as citizens need to plant trees and gardens with our family to help the earth green even more. And again, the result of greening is putting food on the tables for our ever-growing population. And so I guess in a nutshell, bottom line, it's the thing I can say to everybody from an awareness standpoint is be knowledgeable, be informed, study the science, and especially help teach our children to think critically, to ensure that they learn how to think and not just what to think. And so my hope is that everyone can gain and enjoy a greater understanding of how we can preserve this natural beauty for our future generations. And the last thing I'll show is here. This is my contact information. If you're interested in a book and you'd like it signed, it's available. You can come directly to me, just call my cell phone or email me at what's on the screen here, or you can get it through the other sources, the standard book sources. And then lastly, where did I get all this data from? Well, it comes from several places, but really good ones, easy to read ones that you might want to think about looking at to see what I've said and why I've said it and where the data comes from are these three shown on the screen here. And I think I've taken up enough of your time now, so I'll end with that. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on, Elton and Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you, Bill. That was insightful. It was quite beneficial for us to understand where we are. And I mean, this earth is our home, and we have to do a better job at taking care of it. And I know there are complicated issues that we need to be aware of, and the complicated concerns that it's an ongoing detail, but the earth is doing a better job of taking care of us than we are of taking care of it. So let me just put the screen back on. But
stop sharing here then. Sorry, forgot to do that. So thank you for having me. I appreciate just the opportunity to give an update of what's happened over the.
Well, I mean, you paint a very important perspective about what we have before us and what we have to deal with. I mean, especially as it relates to the future. I mean, and fires, and I know last year you had a complication with drought in Utah.
This year too, still this year.
Yeah, and we gotta have water. Gotta have water. You know, yeah. I mean, that's important. How you get around it, and so shipping water in or water pipelines, if that's what we need to do, that's what we'll have to do. You know, find some kind of solutions for that, because. You know,
or just adapt to what for example, the drought that we've got now. The one word thing that you always keep in mind is that these things that are happening to us are cyclic. I mean, it was just 1983 when it was exactly the opposite here in the Intermountain West. It was flooding that we were dealing with, and cyclic, remember that word.
Any questions for Bill? Yeah, he has an insight, and you know, Lisa has a question for you, Bill.
Yeah, excuse me, Bill. First of all, I was fascinated by what you shared. It's always interesting to me when people share a perspective that broadens my perspective and that is different than the common thing that you're hearing out there. So thank you for doing that. My question is, and you did a great job of laying out things that we can do. I'm thinking about myself personally, and I'm thinking about my grandchildren. Are there, practical things? I know you mentioned planting more trees and things and helping to green the earth. Are there other things that someone like me who's just really not fully informed, but learned a lot from you today, that I could be doing or teaching my grandchildren or helping them with, so that we are doing our part to preserve this planet?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of other ones. The one that first comes to mind for me to answer your question is, although carbon dioxide is a good gas that comes out of the tailpipes of our automobiles and the stacks of our power plants, with the ever increasing population, and the pollutant part. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant, but there are other things that come out of the exhaust that are pollutants, and they've been reduced many-fold over the past half a century to where we are now. But with the increasing population, we still need to do more in that regard. And that means to still further reduce the pollutant part of the air, the sulfur oxides, the nitrogen oxides, the dust, and the smoke, especially from our wildfires. But as far as automobiles, it was a long way around to say we should carpool and take mass transit wherever we can to cut down on the pollutant aspects of the smokestacks, or the tailpipes, at least.
No,
That's
good.
one. I'm trying to think of some other simple ones. The other thing, as parents, grandparents, we need to be active with our schools and to make sure that they're teaching critical thinking to our kids. Like I said, that is really important. Most schools are doing a superb job, but critical thinking, and by that I mean just looking at both sides of the story, looking at the data that either supports or not supports what people are saying, is something that our kids need to be taught. And that's what I call the critical thinking. And I think that is really, really important, that we as parents and grandparents need to support our schools and emphasize how important it is to teach them how to think, not just what to think.
You make the good point, Bill. I mean, and even as it relates to greenhouse gases, I don't know if many provinces, cities, and local communities actually engage in real and true recycling. I mean, and big deal. You've got to. I mean, in Europe, they issue citations if you don't recycle like that. So,
and that is going to become even more important as wind and solar mature, because they involve mining at the front end. They're the things that go into the electric batteries for electric vehicles, the things that go into the windmills, and the solar panels. A lot of it is rare earth stuff that isn't widely available, and we need to recycle and preserve not just the common things like our aluminum cans and plastic bottles, or glass bottles, but all the stuff that goes into the energy sources.
So we'll do whatever you can do, to make sure that we preserve the earth, because what you're doing is you're preserving the earth for the next generations.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not just doing it for yourself and what we consume in air and earth and food. I mean, it's nothing like eating a great meal that has come from the earth, like that, or plant-based foods. Big deal to preserve your own health by doing that, but also if you can preserve the health of your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
And we want to preserve the beauty of our countryside as well. And that goes to mining, for example, where mining operations of the past would just cut off the tops of these mountains, or these hills, and dump the residue into the rivers and lakes. And we've just got to make sure that that doesn't happen and help the politicians to, or the regulation makers to not let them do the things that happened when I was a kid, when I heard about the Cuyahoga River bursting into flames.
Whoa.
Because, yeah, it did. I mean, it was oil slicks and stuff that was dumped on it. Anyhow, yes, recycling, very
Yeah.
important.
Any other questions? But I just want to thank you, Bill, for your insight and understanding. I mean, we drive where we drive, we do what we do, and I don't think, I mean, fleeting thought is the earth and Mother Earth and how she so capably provides weather, you know, I mean, even when storms come up, you know, when there's a tornado or a rainstorm, and, you know, my parents used to say when the thunderstorm, you know, quiet and let the Lord do his work. I mean, you know, we live in an amazing time and we want to continue to see the benefits of these amazing times. So I thank you for your contribution there.
Thank you.
We're celebrating Earth Day, and what better way to celebrate it than with you? Bill Pickney has written an amazing book. He's an atmospheric scientist and been with the US Armed Forces for 50 years. And so if you want to know what's going on with the climate, watch this video and tell us what you think, and then get the book. It's available everywhere. And he has a website as well. And the website is twoclimates.com. You're watching Brightside Global Trade.
Climates.org.
.org. Okay. All right. It says com over here, or .org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So,
changed over the last couple of years.
That's
okay.
okay.
So let us move now quickly. We got a couple of new speakers coming, but I do want to take the time to recognize our caller from Kenya, Africa, James, who is in Lake Como. Not Lake Como, Kenya, Africa, and he's a tour guide, and he sees the natural resources in that great continent, and we're just happy to have him with us. And to recognize his special duties, he was introduced to us by Mr. Grover Jackson. And so, so what time of day is it there, James? We're happy to have you. Say a few words.
It is 8:52 p.m.
Okay.
Okay.
that's not too bad.
That's not too bad.
I got caught up in traffic. I just got home now. That's why I'm joining now. But I'm glad I got Bill talking about the climate. That was very good for us, rather for me.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. So Grover brought up the point of the what is that? The swan or the birds from Lake Como, and they were naturally they were overwhelming the lake, but now they're not. So tell us what happened. You know.
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Lake Como, no, on the lake in Kenya. It was overwhelmed by, was it not swan? It was the birds. What birds?
The flamingos.
The flamingos.
Flamingos, yeah.
Yes. Apparently, the flamingos in East Africa, most of them are the lesser flamingos. There are two types, and they feed on an algae known as a blue-green algae that grows in alkaline lakes.
Okay.
And apart from one lake in the Rift Valley, the rest are all alkaline, and that's where they all breed. But they breed in a lake in Tanzania called Lake Natron. But because it's too salty, there's nothing to eat, then they all fly into Kenya to feed.
Okay.
In the last 3 years, the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of changes because all the lakes in the Rift Valley are what we call flooding. We've seen a huge increase in the water levels in the lakes in the Rift Valley, and that has affected the salt content, and through that there's less algae growing. So we're seeing a lot of flamingos flying. And I think maybe Bill might have an answer as to why that is happening. Bill, do you have anything about that?
Okay.
We're gonna
No
have,
problem.
we're gonna have to take him to Kenya so he can find out.
Well, for those of you who don't know, but algae is a great producer of renewable energy. And many people have been growing algae to produce gasoline alternatives. And it's been in research. So we're all waiting for the president of the United States, whichever president that will be, to sign this climate bill so that we can have renewable energy and we can do some savings. So maybe next Earth Day, that could be the topic. So thank you for watching. I'm going to stop recording.